Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Well, actually, today we are launching with some new artwork, a new slogan. So I need to reintroduce and say, welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. So today I'm joined by an international guest, which the listeners will know. This gets me excited, especially the American guests. There's just a different vibe, and I'm sure you're going to live up to expectations and say it how it is. So, do I introduce you as 4 weeks to the beach, or do we use your actual name?
You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner.
I absolutely
You
love
can say
that.
most people know me as 4 weeks to the beach. I do have a name. My name is Aram. I come from Russian and Armenian blood. That's why I have a weird name. And I immigrated from the Soviet Union to America in 1989. So that's why I don't have an accent. Unless you want me to have an accent, and then I will. But it just depends on what your audience resonates with more.
Well, for sure. And I have to ask you the question, where did the Instagram handle come from?
So it's the idea of being in perpetual maintenance or having such good average behavior that if you needed to dial up your physique, or you wanted to do a photo shoot, or you wanted to go to on a trip somewhere for a weekend in a couple of weeks, that you weren't having to like overhaul your entire life. So you're always 4 weeks to the beach ready. Like you're just always doing well with nutrition. You're doing well with training. You're not perfect and you're not super strict or super rigid, but if you need to dial it up, you don't have to completely change everything and lose 40 pounds to finally get the body that you want. You're already living in it. You're just able to make these small little adjustments.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So this is something that actually Matt, my other half, he always talks about this to his clients, of getting to that point where, you know, like you say, 4, maybe 6 weeks where you're walking around in normal life and feeling pretty good. And
Yep.
you've just got, like you say, you can just dial it up, and then you've just got that short space of time to go, I'm pretty much beach ready. Because we're going to talk today about trying to stay lean all year round. So we're going to have many, many tangents today, of course. And I think really the idea behind that, there's a lot of pressure on social media from external pressures, people around you. And actually, if you could get to a point where you're pretty happy at like a maintenance, where you're walking around, clothes fit quite well, maybe you look like you lift, this type of thing, then actually the health consequences that come from particularly competition lean, right? But lean anyway, you get used to feeling like shit. And then you don't really know what it feels like to feel good at like a maintenance body, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I see a lot of people. I mean, I don't. So just to preface any of our conversation with all your audience, I'm going to be very clear and very blunt about this. I do not work with bodybuilders. Not that I refuse to. I just have never had the experience. I prefer to work with general population people, because to me, they're the ones who need the most help. If you're choosing to be a bodybuilder, like, to me, you're a psychopath anyway. So like, you're not the one who I want to educate. Like, you probably know what a protein source is. You probably have some idea of how to train. You're not who needs my help. Mrs. Jones and Mr. Jones, who are 50 pounds overweight and miserable, they're the ones who need my help, and they're the ones who are being lied to. That's why I choose that population. But I highly respect bodybuilding, and I think that we can take a lot of the science that bodybuilders use, or good bodybuilders use, and extrapolate that and use that on general population folks, because at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to look and feel good naked or with clothes on. That's generally why people start eating better, and that's generally why people start working out. So bodybuilders, if you think about the pinnacle of aesthetics, they are the pinnacle of aesthetics. They look better than most athletes. They look better than most powerlifters. They look better than most models in general. They just have a better physique. And how do they build that physique? They build that physique with understanding how to train and understanding how to diet. And that's really all it is. So for me, it's, you know, if I'm speaking to a bodybuilding audience, I always want to understand, like, why did you choose the sport of bodybuilding, and what are your expectations of that sport? Because what you're signing yourself up for is a life of discomfort and a life of rigidity and a life of sacrifice. And you have to be very, very clear with that intention, because if you're just going into it because your friend did it, I see this a lot more often with women than I see it with men, unfortunately, because it's very easy to get into the bikini category. A lot of girls who are relatively lean already, who maybe have a little bit of muscle, they don't really have to go that crazy to become a bikini competitor. They can just kind of start to build some shoulders. They might build a couple of glute lines and maybe some quad lines. taper their waist down a little bit, and boom, they're good. So to me, like, that's really lowered the bar on what bodybuilding used to be, which was just a sport of nothing but grit and determination and just complete and utter bone crushing sacrifice. And it created a lot of unbelievable. I mean, I used to love bodybuilding back in like the 90s, you know, during like the Ronnie Coleman days. And those to me were just, it was a different time. Now there's a ton of drugs. There's a ton of health problems. There's a ton of misunderstanding of the basics, and people are trying to circumvent the basics and trying to get really aggressive with protocols that just don't make sense. And I'm watching people die. I'm watching people become unhealthy. I'm watching people's relationship with food go into the toilet. I'm seeing more and more eating disorders and more body dysmorphia. And for what? You know, the reality is most bodybuilders are never going to make money off of it. They're never going to become professionals. They're never going to get to that accolade of driving around in the Lambo because of all your sponsorships. And every time you walk into a gym in Dubai, you know, people know who you are because it's such an international claim to fame. Like, you know, the best example of that is probably, oh God, what's his name? Kai Green. So Kai Green has never won shit, but he's one of the most famous bodybuilders in the world because he's so big and he's got such a presence about him that he's made a career out of it. And he was smart, because he realized he was never going to be a great bodybuilder, but he knew that with his aesthetic and his physique, he can do some marketing, he can do some selling, and he probably has created a great life for himself. But how many people like him that you never hear about, you know, that end up having heart attacks, that end up having type 2 diabetes, that end up having all sorts of coronary issues and body dysmorphia issues and mental health problems. And they just get pushed off to the side and nobody ever knows them. There's no help for them. There's no assistance in any type of way. And it's a really sad existence for something just to get a trophy or a medal or a card.
Yeah, for sure. All of what you said there completely resonate with, and it's certainly messages I talk about on the podcast and on my own social media. I think that we can often, as competitors, get into that trap of feeling like, okay, so this is something that's sparkly and new. This looks great. I'm going to challenge myself. And I often reference it as, why don't you do a 5K or a 10K run, or do something that is not so extreme, or get to something like a photo shoot condition. And yeah, it's, you know, I have clients that do photo shoot preps and they look fucking sick. And then it's like, you know, they're so fulfilled from it. And I often find, and I'm sure you'll agree from what you've already said, people become competitive in bodybuilding, they maybe do quite well, and then they may not continue to do very well. And then they continue plugging on, they keep going, they sacrifice everything in their life, and they don't have that same fulfillment as someone that does a photo shoot prep, as the example, and they go, wow, you know, I'm a lifestyle client, I've completely changed my life. And that's what physique development can bring. But we often miss that in the competitive world. And like you say, it's very sad what you get off the back of that.
I love the idea of photo shoots. I mean, I work with mostly women, and a lot of times they'll start seeing some changes and they'll start getting excited about it. And then they'll be like, hey, should I do a bodybuilding show? And I'm like, listen, 3 weeks ago, you were just complaining that your relationship with food was bad and that your body image was bad. And now you're asking to do a bodybuilding show just purely out of emotional drive because you had 1 or 2 good days strung together. Like, this is not a good idea. I've had to reverse diet a lot of competitors because their coaches just drop them after their competition. They have no idea what to do. And I think women, again, are the most susceptible to the extreme weight gain. I mean, I've seen women fluctuate 50 pounds in 2 months. You know, I've seen macro numbers of like 275 grams of protein, 20 grams of fat, 40 grams of carbs heading into a show. I've seen 4 hours of cardio being assigned. I've seen just ridiculous amounts of drugs, diuretics, and just for what? You know, I sit there and I have to, like, I was just talking to a kid today at the gym. I haven't seen in a while. And I looked at him like, man, you lost a lot of weight. He's like, yeah, man, I've had a lot of health problems. I'm like, what happened? And he was telling me that he was trying to get into a show and his coach had him on like 7 different types of gear. He was having him do 2 hours of cardio 7 days a week. And he ended up in the hospital. And I'm like, dude, like by the way, his genetics are awful. His work ethic is not great. His mental health is in the toilet. He just went through a breakup. He has 3 dogs. He has a full-time job. He's a full-time student. I'm like, dude, this is not one more. You don't need this on your plate right now. Like, maybe wait 2 or 3 years when your life gets a little bit simpler and you have the bandwidth for it. But right now is just not the time, because you don't like, and I get it. Like, I grew up in the 90s, in the early 2000s, where, like, you know, to us, work ethic was like, you leave a 12-hour workday on a job site and you go to the gym and you're in your work boots and in your jeans and you train hard and you squat with your jeans on and just keep grinding. But the problem is that there was never any discussion of the consequences. There was never like what happens when you grind yourself down to a stub, and what aftercare is there for people like you. There's actually there's a doctor from the state that I'm from in Connecticut, and his number one priority is to rehabilitate chronic steroid users from steroids, because the suicide rate is about 85%, which is an alarming number. So think about that. Like, so if you've been on gear for 20 years and you've been trying to become a bodybuilder, you resonate as a bodybuilder, you have to at some point regulate your system back to a normal place, which, you know, obviously means a little bit of TRT, low dose testosterone, getting all your hormones in line, and just understanding that you're not going to be able to walk around like this monster that you were. And it's not good for your heart. It's not good for your kidneys and your liver. And we see people now dropping dead left and right. And it's because of these extreme drug protocols and this idea, because the coaches want so badly to get the accolade of having athletes on stage win pro cards. They don't give a shit about the athletes. They just want to have that recognition. And you have to do a really good job as a potential bodybuilder to really seek out the best type of guidance that's available, because you can actually put yourself into a life or death situation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that's, like we've agreed, it's really, really sad and it's really hard to hear. But it's also something that doesn't, particularly in the UK, I found, obviously I can't speak for the States, but it goes under the radar. So we don't really have many people push into sort of the Olympia per se, like reachable people, and we don't really hear about it that much. So you get a lot of people get into bodybuilding through social media, through their friends or whatever else. And they aspire to, you know, what people are doing at the Olympia, et cetera, and they think that those people are doing the same as them to do, like you mentioned earlier, a bikini show. And there's certainly on social media, this, you know, this elite level of competitors that people think, you know, that are in an amateur league, they're going to get there. And I found it when I first started out. I didn't realize that females, bikini athletes, use PEDs. I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to look like that if I sort my nutrition and my training out. I genuinely thought that, you know, the delt caps, everything you've spoken about already. And it's like, actually, that wasn't attainable. And my coach told me, whereas coaches do not tell people, because like you said, they want the sword. They don't give a shit about the person's mental health. And it's true. And, you know, people may listen going, why are you slagging other coaches off? But this happens, and you really do need to research if you're going to get a coach to go into a bodybuilding prep, to look after yourself during the prep and after, because I also have what you've had, people in the reverse out, the coach fucks off. Normally you'd assume that the client fucks off, but the coach is like, didn't do very well. That's it. Yeah, it's absolutely madness. But I think that people need to hear it on things like podcasts and, you know, like your social media, you put out really good messages because it's the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we just need more understanding, just basic understanding of physiology, basic understanding of biology and exercise science. And what I'm seeing a lot with bodybuilding communities right now is that there's not, like, you ask a bodybuilder, like, what are your macros or how many calories you're eating? And they have no idea. Like, they're just given a piece of paper with a food plan, eat this at this time, at this many ounces or this many grams. And they're just robots. And like, here's your workout program. Just do it. Okay, why? Like, why am I doing a bilateral lat focused row versus a unilateral lat focused row? Why am I doing squats with a barbell versus a Smith machine? Like, explain this stuff to me so I understand it. So at some point I can empower myself to be able to do this stuff on my own versus just being a monkey that follows directions. And there's just not enough education that's being provided with the coaching. And my whole thing with my clients is like, I know my clients don't know anything. So my number one priority is teach them as much as I possibly can to give them some level of autonomy and confidence, so that at some point, the only reason why they have a coach is purely for accountability and for check-ins. And with bodybuilders, like, I mean, I don't know any, I know 2 bodybuilders here in by the way, San Diego, where I live, tons of bodybuilders, tons. 𝗁𝗔𝗍 Jr. is here. There's 3 bodybuilding gyms that are just purely, literally bodybuilding gyms with the best lighting and the mirrors and the best equipment. And it's just this massive culture here to where like even me, like I'm 5'9", 211 pounds. Like I'm not a small guy, but I walk into a bodybuilding gym and even I'm intimidated. I'm like, Jesus, these fucking people are monsters. And there's 26-year-old kids with just boils on their back because they've been on trend for 6 months straight. And it's just this push towards aesthetics and this push towards competing. They don't know how to train properly. They don't eat clean foods. They're dirty bulking their way into the 250, 270 pounds. The girls basically look like skeletons, or they just get super fat. There's no balance. There's no understanding of like how the body functions and handles stress, what happens to the hormonal profile when it finally gets so degraded because it's been underfed or overfed for too long. There's no consideration of, well, maybe you should back off a little bit, or, this is not the season of your life to really be leaning into it. And I understand why. It's because you're a product of your environment. And if your environment is so aesthetically driven and so bodybuilding focused, then that's all you know. Like, it's no different than like on our social media. The more stuff you look at, the more the algorithm keeps showing you the same stuff. Yeah. So we assume that everybody in the world is a bodybuilder. We assume that everybody in the world is training and eating well. I mean, we're such a tiny subset of the population. I mean, bodybuilders are minuscule. And then behind that, it's people like me. I don't consider myself a bodybuilder. I just consider myself a meathead. Like, I enjoy training. But if I miss a training day, I don't care. If I have a burger on a Saturday night and a beer, I don't give a fuck. Like, I want to have a normal life. Mm-hmm. Because when I had abs, my life wasn't any better. Mm-hmm. My fulfillment and satisfaction every day wasn't any better. If anything, I was worried about not doing anything to fuck it up. It was almost like what I always tell people, like, with a great body comes a great level of responsibility and a great amount of worry. It's almost like buying a brand new Lamborghini that you can barely afford, and then not being able to even enjoy driving it or getting into it with dirty shoes or wiping the seat off every time you leave. It's like you're just sitting there and worried about maintaining that car. All you can care about is just sitting there and staring at this physique, and that's all you have. That's the only thing you identify as. And to me, the world is bigger than that. Like, you have an emotional side of you. You have an intellectual side, a spiritual side. You want people to like you and want to know you and be interacting with you more than just because of your physique. Mm-hmm. And then that's all you turn into, is just this dancing bear that's performing for people.
Yeah, for sure. I had this massive identity shift when I came away from this last prep. I was like, everyone that introduces me to someone else, or, if I speak to someone or whatever, Sarah the bodybuilder. And then I had this almost like epiphany where I was like, guys, I'm Sarah the person as well. And I have a lot of other things to offer. And you're so right there. You buy into the identity, and it does get you off. And particularly, when you're getting lean, the social media is popping off. You're seeing new lines every day. You get closer to the show. Everyone's, on board. And then after the show, as we've touched on with reversing out, that's when it gets tricky. So hence why, like our topic today, why would you want to stay lean all year round? Because everyone's on board to see it, and you get all the likes, you get all the interaction, and then you're in a hole. And how do you come away from that when you don't have any other purpose in life or any other identity? And maybe your coach is driving you to do all the shows and keep pushing. And I guess if someone was listening and they find themselves in this spot, so I can't let go of being on the leaner side, what would your best bit of advice be? It's hard because you're not coaching them, but if someone is listening and they're really fucking struggling.
I would tell somebody to really appreciate the flexibility of maintenance, but not to the point of complacency, because I think there's a difference between acceptance and complacency. acceptance is probably one of the most important skill sets that a human being will ever learn, to just accept things the way they are, and this is what it is. So I'll use a female for an example, because I would imagine that it's just an easier example. So let's say, for example, a female diets down to 900 calories. She's 2 weeks prior to her show. She's probably somewhere around 110 pounds. She's basically stage lean. She's ready to rock and roll. Well, she can't live on 900 calories forever. So you have to understand conceptually and intellectually that this physique was built by extreme rigidity and extreme sacrifice. So just think about your 16 or 12 or however long your prep was. Like, can you live like that for 365 days? And the reality is you can't, and you shouldn't, because there's ramifications of going too low in fat from a hormonal standpoint. Having carbs drop down is going to start to damage thyroid function. Having protein be so high chronically, it's going to create digestive issues at some point. So all of these things have to be understood, and those are all risks, but part of the risks that you accept to do the thing that you're doing, right? It's no different than an American football player who's getting hit in the head all day long. Yeah. He's making $30 million a year, but he knows that at some point he's going to either get a concussion or multiple concussions. He's going to probably have CTE. He's probably not going to be able to use his hands or his feet because he's going to have paralysis of some kind. But if he's willing to accept the risk for that paycheck for that period of time, then so be it. They're adults. They shouldn't be talked out of it. So I think just understanding that if you know that what got you to this lean physique is not what's going to be able to be sustained, then you have to also be just as good at the maintenance period of life as you are at prep. And there's a beautiful freedom that occurs when you start to understand that your relationship with food is not dictated by your aesthetic, but it really is dictated by how you want to actually feel. So stop paying attention to what the mirror says or what the scale says, and start paying attention to, am I hungry? Am I full? Am I satisfied? Am I happy? How do I feel today? How's my energy? How's my mood? How's my sleep? How's my strength inside the gym? If those things aren't being focused on just as extremely as the aesthetic or the weight, then people are just going to be always chasing this. Now, it's no different than chasing money. Like if people get so wrapped up in the idea that I work to get paid, well, yeah, but do you enjoy what you do? Mm-hmm. Right? Like there's a lot of, obviously like right now, like OnlyFans is very big. There's a lot of people that are just seeing the idea of getting on OnlyFans or Fansly or whatever you guys use it in the UK and stuff. So girls and guys know they can make very easy money, very quick money by just getting on this website, getting naked, doing stuff for their audience, and making this quick dopamine-like cash. That's exactly what the aesthetic is, because the human body is not going to be able to stay as a woman at 13% body fat for 20 years straight. There's just no way. Mm-hmm. So if you can't accept living life at 20 or 22% for some period of time, or maybe a little bit lower than that, or maybe a little bit higher than that, and understanding that some flexibility is nice to have, then what's the point of all of it? Like I have no problem with being excited about a challenge. I think it's really cool if a human being can push themselves to those limits and be reasonable about it. But what's the after plan? Like, what is your plan for once that show is over? And now you plan for the next show, but that next show, don't schedule it 3 months out from the last show. Like my best friend from college was a very good bodybuilder, and he competed 3 times in 15 years. Mm-hmm. He won all 3 shows.
I love that.
He was a pro from day one, but he took 3 years to prepare for each show. Yeah. So he spent this inordinate amount of time just crafting every little thing, and he started a business, had multiple kids throughout those 15 years. So he lived a life. His life wasn't bodybuilding. His hobby was bodybuilding. And because he did it so well, he was able to compete at a high level because he spent a ton of time investing in the aftercare and in the in-betweens of shows versus just only focusing on another show. Like I know people that do 5-6 shows a year. Yeah. It's insane to me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like, how do you put yourself into that level of depletion for so long? Like, you can't feel good. You probably almost forget what feeling good even feels like.
Yeah.
So you have to give the body, you have to give the body a chance to rebound and get back to just homeostasis and normal, and be okay with being okay for a little while. You can get it back. You know that next time you feel like doing it, you already have all the tools. You have the skill set to do it. You have the discipline. You've proven to yourself that you can do it. So don't worry about not being able to. You've proved it's almost like when people lose. Yeah, I have clients who are bariatric surgery patients. They lost 400 or 500 pounds, but then they always think like they're always afraid. I'm going to gain that weight back. I'm going to gain that weight back. I'm like, no, you're not. That person that gained that weight originally is gone. They're dead. The person you've replaced that individual with somebody who has better habits, with somebody who has a better relationship with food, better mental health. So that person is not coming back. That weight is not coming back. So you have to trust in yourself that you understand the processes and the mechanisms to get yourself lean. So you can always accept not having to be as lean.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that, because you touched on earlier actually about, this is a tangent we could go on here, with looking good naked. And you spoke about OnlyFans there. That's what reignited my brain there. I think that we often, when we get lean, we think that we look better naked. We think that in a relationship, for a girl, the guy's going to think, I'm shredded, I look great. But it's not the case. And, you know, they're scared to break you when you're tiny, tiny, tiny. But also, you know, when we actually talk about this as life outside of bodybuilding, if you're in a relationship, or even if you're dating, or whatever your situation is, that actually your energy's in the gutter a lot of the time in a prep. You don't feel good. You think that you look good, but you do not look normal. You know, I get people say to me in prep, are you okay? Because they think I've got some sort of eating disorder, or there's something, you know, desperately wrong with me, and they want to feed me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm getting ready for a show, and I'm at a point where it's cool. But actually the attraction, which it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, for males and females when they're lean, actually it changes the dynamic, and it maybe isn't what people would see if they think as lean as attractive, right?
Well, for me, I could speak to the male side very easily, because I've been in a place like 2015, I dieted down for a photo shoot. I got down to about 7%. And I was probably the leanest I've ever been in my life. Like, you know, ab veins, striations in my shoulders and in my back, the Christmas tree, everything. For probably about a year after that, I was not a man. My libido was completely gone. My erectile function was non-existent. At the time, I was dating a 21-year-old girl, and I was like, I think I was 31 at the time, and she wanted to fuck all the time. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with you. You're a beautiful woman. I love you. Everything is fine. I have no desire to do it. And then there's guilt and there's shame, because when you try to perform, you can't. And there are I know so many guys that are bodybuilders that live like this, and they don't talk about it because there's no outlet for it. It's always, and this is kind of where I think like the men's mental health side versus the women, there's a lot of help for women with eating disorders and body dysmorphia, and women are talking about it openly. But then there's really nobody talking about it with guys, because guys are so embarrassed, because their entire identity is wrapped up in their boner, right? Like if they don't get an erection, they're not a man. And I get that, because that's how I felt. Mm-hmm. But that's where it comes down to communicating and understanding that like attraction and desire is about communicating and about understanding one another, not just because you look at something and it turns you on. Most desire and most attraction is actually mental. It's not physical. Mm-hmm. So arousal does not happen all the time just because somebody gets touched or somebody sees something that's sexy. Arousal and attraction happens because there's a connection. There's an attraction that's deeper than just surface level. So, I mean, I've dated female bodybuilders, and when they're on prep, there's no libido anyway, unless they're on, you know, Anavar, they're on low dose trend or test, and maybe they have
that does the trick.
a little bit more libido. And at that point, it's just like, you know, then you're just like, I can't even keep up with you, which then becomes not enjoyable anyway. So it's like, it's finding this like very careful balance of like, do you want to just show up as this physical creature that somebody just uses you for? Or do you want to have a deeper spiritual, emotional connection with somebody? And don't get me wrong, listen, I'm not a saint. I fuck for sport too. I get it. But it's not always like that. And life is a little bit more important than just getting your rocks off and showing up as this sex symbol or being desired by somebody. Because at the end of the day, if you're a woman who's basing her entire worth off of whether a man wants you or not, once the man gets what he needs, he's probably going to move on anyway. Yeah. That's unfortunately the truth. Unless you have substance and you guys build a connection and there's a reason to stick around. I mean, I spent my mid-20s and my early 30s just fucking everything that moved. And what I was doing was filling a void. I was filling a void because I wasn't confident. So every time I was able to sleep with another woman, it gave me the validation that I was wanted, but I wasn't really actually desired.
Yeah.
I was just a good looking package that was utilized and then thrown away the same way I was throwing them away. So it was just this mutual disrespect. And now that I'm older and I understand exactly what I want, I know what I don't want, I can connect to people on a much deeper level, which makes all of it, the physical side, the intimacy, just that much better, because I don't care about, like, yeah, of course you want to look decently aesthetic because it's more fun.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be dick skin lean to do that. Like, most women don't care if a guy has abs.
Yeah.
Most women don't care if a guy has, you know, massive quads or massive hamstring lines or, you know, whatever. And most men don't want a girl who's 109 pounds who's about to fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a man usually wants a little something to hold on to, or maybe something that's a little bit more feminine, to where there's a curve and a hip,
Yeah,
and some imperfection, because that makes you human.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with, I don't particularly, well, I don't really like the aesthetic of, you know, shredded abs and dialed in. For me, it's not, I wouldn't go, oh, wow, it's really attractive. And it's, I've always done this sport for myself, so maybe that sort of ties into it as well. But I wouldn't say I look at people that are absolutely diced and I'm like, that's really attractive. For me, it's like, that's a sick physique that's not attainable, but I know what they've done to get there. So that's super, super cool. But it's certainly something that, like you say, people don't talk about the mental health side of things with guys. Now, you know, I know that people come for help with regards to erectile dysfunction because it's to the other each end of the spectrum. So I don't know if you found this, but it can be when you're extremely overweight, or it can obviously be when you're lean. And it's going to be embarrassing, like you said, for sure. But it shouldn't not be spoken about if then you're pulling yourself away from your partner because you feel worthless. You feel like, you said, you're not a man. Now, if that happens for a female, obviously, if the guy can't perform, and if there's someone listening, again, you know, okay, so is this that they don't want me? And I really like that you address that, because it's not often the case. But I believe if it's made into this big thing, the guy's going to find it even harder mentally to be able to perform. But I don't know how you would, you know, as a female, if you're like, well, you can't perform and you're, you know, on your high horse about it, how you try and rein that back from a guy's point of view to actually go, it's okay. Do you know what I mean? We can talk about it and do something about it.
So I think for men, you have to understand that you're not just a penis. Like, sex isn't just penetration.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think we have to understand that, like, when people are having intercourse, it's not just intercourse. There's also, I mean, like, foreplay is a lost art. And every woman on the planet, I think, could agree with me that if a man spent 20 minutes preparing a woman, she'd probably be a lot more excited, and it would be a much more cohesive, better experience in general. If you're a guy that's listening to this and the only thing that you have is a hard dick, you're not really bringing much to the table. I mean, a woman could get a dildo that's better than you any day of the week, and those dildos vibrate.
Yeah.
So you don't even vibrate. Sorry, buddy. That's just how it works. So if you don't understand how to touch a woman, how to breathe on a woman, how to talk to a woman, how to ask her questions about what it is that even excites her, what does she want, what do you want, and you don't have that type of communication with one another, then you're just one piece, and that's a whole, and that's all that happens, and that's not very exciting. So I think just having that level of open communication, and it requires a lot of vulnerability, and a lot of people don't have that because they don't have a safe space for it. So I think it's, somebody has to take that lead, whether it's the guy, whether it's the woman, and just say, hey, listen, I understand you're struggling. And instead of us always trying to force this, let's maybe, like, one of the best things that I found is just, like, if you know you're having trouble, or if it's already in your head as a guy and you can't get aroused or whatever, instead of, like, trying to fuck or trying to go have sex, like, go into the bedroom, close the doors, and just lay with one another. Just spend time just, like, being naked, not actually thinking about sex or wanting sex or being pressured to have sex, but, like, touch each other, explore each other, talk to one another about how your day was, what's going on, what movie do you want to go see, what concert do you want to go to, like, what is making you a human being outside of just that physical relationship. And I bet when you start actually spending some intimacy, because that's intimacy. Like, sex to me is not intimacy. Intimacy is, like, getting to know one another, understanding one another's hopes and dreams and problems and traumas, and that's intimacy. Sex is sex. Sex is water. Sex is food. Sex is fulfilling a physiological desire versus intimacy is connection. So separating the two and understanding how they can work together, but also being able to have that open discourse about like, what is it that's driving you? What turns you on? What doesn't turn you on? What role do you want me to play? Are you somebody who wants to take the lead? Are you somebody who wants to be more submissive? All this stuff needs to be understood, but it takes a great level of communication and a great level of maturity to get there.
Yeah, for sure. I love the vulnerability talk there, because this is something I feel so, I guess I've always been in this like mindset where I'm like, no, I'm an independent woman. So it really rings true to me. And until I started letting that guard down and going, do you know what? You know, I can let my guard down in certain scenarios with someone that I trust, and I'm able to be vulnerable in all areas of life beyond sex, you know, being able to talk about things that I've struggled with as a bodybuilder, all of the different things. It's so cathartic, and it's almost like addictive when you are vulnerable. And in a relationship, it fucking excels. Like, it honestly, night and day difference, isn't it? And you're like, I just want to be with this person all the time. It's so fucking cool, and it's free. It's free medicine, right?
That's the best part is like what you just said. It just turns into something so much more. And I spent so many years of my life thinking that sex was what I wanted, not really even understanding what I wanted. I just knew that the physical act of sex or winning it, right? It's always like this thing where it was like, you were allowing me to get it from you, and that's what made me valuable, because that means that you wanted me.
Yeah.
But my question to anybody that's living a life like that is, are you actually coming back for seconds and thirds? So was it just a one and done thing and you just were able to do it and then everybody just moves on?
Mhm.
Or was it actually an experience that both people enjoy, that both people want to reconnect on and revisit, and there's something actually come out of it that's deeper? But that also comes down to understanding yourself and doing some introspective thinking and spending some time alone, because I think a lot of people are so codependent that they need to be around other people, or they need to latch on to other people for self-fulfillment because they don't have any intrinsic drive to be their own person. And I think especially with how vain the sport of bodybuilding is, I mean, it's completely based off of vanity. I mean, I know so many, like I connect with, I think 80% of my followers on Instagram are women. And the nightmare stories I've heard from female bodybuilders dating male bodybuilders, because male bodybuilders end up becoming very chauvinistic. They become very closed off. They become very narcissistic, and they become very, very angry. And it's probably due to a number of reasons. A, because your whole life is based around competition and sport and being the best. It's loaded with a bunch of mood altering drugs, right? All the different steroid compounds change moods and alter moods. You have these constant fluctuations of energy and moods and sexual ability and not. So it's just, you never understand what person you're getting. So getting back to the root of understanding that it's a temporary thing, like you were bodybuilding for a certain amount of time, you compete, and then once that competition is over, you get to push that part of you to the side, and you get to find this other part of you that you haven't looked at yet. So are you somebody who likes to travel? Are you somebody who likes to cook? Are you somebody who likes to read? Are you somebody who wants to start a business? Like, who are you outside of this aesthetic that you've built, which, by the way, is super impressive.
Yeah.
Like, I think the building a body is one of the most tangibly hard things in this world to do. It's almost like amassing wealth, because nobody can take that away from you. You were the one who did it. You built it. Your work, your effort, your tireless pursuit towards doing this is what got you here. But this can't be the only thing that you are.
Yeah, it's that self-reflection for sure. Actually, what you just said there, something I saw on social media the other day, a reel. This guy was like, I don't want to work with overweight people. I'm not going to invest my money into someone that does not care about what they look like. It sort of caught me off guard in a way, but it was like, actually, you know, it's almost like your marketable physique can breed respect, that you don't even have to, you know, it's like when you go in the gym and you've got a pretty good physique, there's almost like that shift of, I know what you've done to get there, per se. And that for sure would tie into, again, why you'd want to keep trying to stay lean and hang on to that physique. Now, when we talk about the trying to stay in that spot and people struggling with losing the validation externally and the likes going down on social media, this type of thing. And we've already obviously spoken about hitting a maintenance and finding what you are outside of that. But if you're so consumed it's really, really tricky. Now, like you said, with PEDs, etc., you know, off the back of my last prep, I still took Clen for a while as I was reversing out because I titrated down. My dose got very high. It was fucked up, as you can imagine. Like, I was literally not on this planet for sure. And then, you know, you're trying to incorporate foods and then you titrate it down. And there's almost like parts of prep you try and hang on to. So it's like, what can I still do? So I might over restrict a little bit, or, you know, self-restrict. I may eat a bit more than I'm on the cardio, or I'll take a bit more Clen, or all of these things. I don't know if you've come across this type of thought process with the people you work with trying to like keep hold of things, but maybe not even telling you as their coach until you dig a bit deeper, maybe.
I think the reality is there's a level of control that people want to have over their physique and over their body. And I think when they're controlling things like nutrition, when they're controlling drug dosages, when they're controlling cardiovascular output, they have a predictable level of success, right? I've done this before and this is what happened. So if I keep doing that, this is what's going to happen again. But people don't realize that when a woman gets pregnant, her body changes, right? Every single baby that she has, the microbiome of her stomach changes. Her hormonal structure changes. The way that her body deposits fat changes. Her ability to handle stress and her mood changes. So all those things change per child. It's almost like every time you go through a prep, your body changes, because what you're putting your body through is so extreme that it has to almost genetically alter that individual. And there actually has been research that's been done to show people that have either been in extreme dieting phases or have been in extreme bulking phases, their DNA actually does change. So you chemically as a person become a different person every single time. So you can't expect, you know, let's say, for example, you've done one prep and something happened. You can't expect that same thing to happen the second time around. So you may have to take a different approach. So if you want to hold on to like baseline level habits, understand that the quality of the food you eat is going to dictate a lot about how you feel. So, you know, when we're trying to diet down, people start using all these hacks and tricks to trick themselves into being satiated or into placating to their sweet tooth or whatever else. What I think people really need to understand is try to be as natural as possible. So like whatever foods you eat, I mean, one of the easiest ways to get a ton of food volume and not a lot of carbs is just eat potatoes, like sweet potatoes, white potatoes. It's a great way to have a lot of food with not a lot of carbohydrate and not a lot of calories. Rice, probably not a good idea because you don't get as much rice and it's not as filling. So if you're doing, it's just, 50 grams of rice is 40 grams of carbs. It sucks. Whereas 200 grams of potatoes is 40 grams of carbs. That's a lot more satisfying. Yeah. Don't be afraid of things like pineapple and melons and water-based fruits, citrus fruits, kiwis, berries, which are a ton of fiber and almost no carbs at all. I mean, a 200-gram container of blueberries is 14 grams of carbs and probably 7 or 8 grams of fiber. So you're going to have a really nice digestive outcome from that. So get back to the basics when you're not in prep and try to practice some of that same level of control and restraint around the fun foods, because if you saw that post I posted a while back about how bodybuilding is just all about the cheat meal when you're done.
Yeah.
And that's what it's almost like you train for 16 weeks and you diet for 16 weeks just to get pizza and to get donuts and to get cookies, when you can have a donut every single week and you can have pizza every single week and you can have a cookie every single week if you understand portion control and you have restraint, because then that thing isn't as alluring. It's not as sexy. It's not like this red button that you have to push because you're not allowed to push it all year long. Yeah. It's not, I think when you restrict something for long enough, it becomes this thing you have to have, versus if you are allowing it into your life regularly, then you don't have that same level of temptation, right? It's like, there's a difference between the good looking guy at the bar who's getting hit on all day long by women versus the guy that never gets hit on by women, who just has one person hit on them and he starts chasing them all of a sudden because that's all he can think about. So I think just having a reasonable relationship with stuff like that's a little bit more indulgent. And it doesn't mean you're going to stop training. It doesn't mean that you have to stop doing cardio. It doesn't mean that you have to start eating like shit, but it just means that finding that balance of where you can find that middle ground, incorporate some of these foods, dial back the cardiovascular output, because you just don't need to do all that zone 2 cardio that you're doing. Maybe instead of doing 2 hours on the Stairmaster or 2 hours on the elliptical, just take 20,000 steps, go out in nature, spend some time outside, do that stuff that's a little bit more cup filling, as opposed to just like, I'm doing this for a purpose. And if I don't do this and I don't sweat and I don't burn this many calories, then it's not effective. Like your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, accounts for way more of your metabolic function than any exercise that you'll ever do. And you're not really burning that many calories while you train anyway. So who gives a shit? You can eat back those calories in 2 seconds. You can spend 2 hours on the treadmill on a 10 incline with a weighted vest on, do legs for 2 hours, and all the calories that you burn can be done in one meal.
Yeah, yeah.
One meal can fuck all that up. So this idea that I have to wait for this reward of food or this ritualized gluttony that I have to just sit here and just pig out because I'm never going to have it again for another 16 weeks. It's why people's relationship with food is so disordered.
Yeah, it's so fucked up. And I talk from personal experience and friends who are bodybuilders. And when I work backstage at shows and I'm, seeing competitors and how they're talking about food, etc. And this is when they haven't even stepped on stage. And, sometimes they're not lean, what we say as peeled. And, they're already talking about, oh, after this, I'm going to go and smash this, or they've got it in their bag or whatever else. And I'm like, guys, you probably don't want to hear me saying this, but please focus on your stage performance and what you've done to get here. Now, they might have dieted for 6 months. Some people do it from a body composition where they need a much longer period of time, or they're natural or whatever. And I'm like, come on, guys. Or people sometimes will go in between doing their first, stepping on stage, and they maybe win their category and they get to go on for the overall. They'll go and get food in between, donuts, whatever. And I'm like, just hold fire. And also, I'm sure you're going to agree with me here. After the show, try and go somewhere that's a really nice palate experience. Burgers can be proper steak burgers, like delicious, really nice, like sweet potato fries, some different veggies that you haven't had for 16 weeks, maybe some root veggies instead of green veggies, things like this, and do it with your loved ones rather than getting a McDonald's drive-through on the way home. It makes no sense to me, but I understand why. Social media and what other people, say as enjoyable food, also your upbringing. If McDonald's was a treat when you were 5 years old, you probably think, oh, I can't wait to have Mackie D's. But the digestive system, as a bodybuilder in physique development, what are we trying to do here? We're building an aesthetic. What's going to happen if you eat shit? Some people get away with it. Generally, you're going to blow out and you feel like fucking shit. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, I've seen some of these. I've watched people develop pancreatitis because of cheat meals.
Yeah.
I've watched people develop gut bacteria issues, even viral conditions inside the small and large intestine.
Mm-hmm.
It gets really, because think about it. You're living on tilapia, white meat chicken, white rice, and spinach or green beans for how long? Yeah. And then all of a sudden now you pour 500 grams of fat into the system because you just had the ice cream, the cookies, the donuts, the burger, the pizza, all of it in one shot. It's almost like just this alarm goes off in your body. And I think what you said was perfect. Instead of going out to get this nasty shit after you're done competing or because you're allowed a cheat meal or whatever, get some sushi, get some Mediterranean food that's relatively clean, but relatively exciting. Get a nice piece of steak with a baked potato and maybe some sour cream on top. Don't go nuts into this idea that I just have to consume everything in these large, disgusting quantities, or else I'm not fulfilled, because then the reason behind why you're doing all this stuff is still not appropriate.
It makes no sense when we align it with physique development. But I didn't realize that. I always thought, well, this is what bodybuilding is. And that's why I really loved your post, because it was like, I thought it's prep and then you eat till you can't eat anymore. And then you go and do cardio the next day. And I just got into it because this is what people put on social media. This is not, coming from no bodybuilding in my background. Suddenly I'm like, right, so that's what you need to do. And it was a fucking really lonely spot, because you do these things, you overeat because everyone else is, and you think it's cool and whatever else. But also there's merit in, when you look on social media, if someone's pushing a load of gear, if someone's got a lot more muscle mass than you. If someone's maybe, say, a bikini competitor and you're looking at someone that's in women's bodybuilding or physique or whatever, you know, their tolerance could be a lot more. They may be more experienced as well. There's a lot that goes into it, but Instagram, you only see these snapshots. But I always try and say this to clients: if you're trying to build a physique, it literally makes no sense to eat a load of shit. But I want to empower you to have something. What do you like? What foods do you like before bodybuilding? You know, do you like a steak? Do you like some salmon? Someone's going to cook it in a different way. It's going to be really nice, but we need to monitor your GI. But it does fall on deaf ears sometimes.
And I think it just comes down to that same level of restriction, right? It just comes down to the fact that you're looking at the end of the rainbow as this like proverbial pot of gold. And that's what you've been waiting for so long. I just don't understand it. Because you're not going to feel good. And I think it's because, again, people are not focused on how they feel inside out. They're like, well, I still have abs. I still feel pretty filled out. I still feel pretty good. Like, yes, I had 5 bouts of diarrhea for the next 24 hours because I couldn't handle any of the stuff that I ate. But at the end of the day, I still don't look bad. Well, yeah, you don't look bad, but you're destroying your insides. Yes. Your body can't handle that level of fat, that level of sodium, that level of sugar that you just blasted into your body. It's almost like if you've never taken drugs and all of a sudden you just went with 1 gram of test and 2 grams of tren. And now you're like, oh my God, I'm getting all these amazing effects, but you're getting all these side effects as well. Yeah. Like, yeah, of course, your body's not ready for that stuff. You have to titrate up and titrate down. And food is no different. Food is a drug. Mm-hmm. It's got the same properties as any type of pharmaceutical. It's the amount of food that you eat should be grams per kilogram, just like drug dosages should be. So if you weigh X, you eat this much. If you weigh X, you weigh this much. It's literally that simple. But it's psychology over physiology every single time. The psychology of the individual that's going into that show, that's been told by other bikini competitors or by other bodybuilders that it's going to be so much fun to eat this shit. I get to post about it and I get all this attention because of it, as opposed to, hey, I'm post show and I didn't need to binge and I didn't need to overeat. I was just able to go and celebrate the show with my family, my loved ones. We had a nice piece of meat. We were able to have some sushi. I was able to go to sleep that night, not have meat sweats, and everything is good. And now I get to walk through the next 3 months, get my hormones back in line, get my digestive health back in line. I only put on maybe a couple of pounds after the show instead of 30 pounds after the show. And now I can walk around as this comfortable, reasonable person. And I don't have to keep fighting for this aesthetic that I just immediately lost because I just fought for 16 weeks and lost it in 3 days.
Yeah. And it's very hard to get it back. You know, any level of condition, once you, especially natural to a certain degree, you know, both sides of the coin, but you know, if you put on that weight, of course you're going to be in a hole, right? So your example earlier, or, you know, say 10 kilograms, 20 kilograms in a short space of time, you're not going to want to go to the gym because people have validated you that you're fucking shredded. No, you're not. You're not going to want to get naked, I'd imagine. You know, I'm talking from what I would assume. I'm not saying this is everyone, but you're probably not going to feel good naked. Probably not going to feel good in clothes. People at work are going to go, what the fuck has happened to you? You cannot control what you're eating. You're getting these like dopamine hits from the foods that you've wanted for this whole prep, and your energy and how you feel about yourself. That's going to affect if you want to train anyway. And then how do you get back from that? And I truly believe this is a coaching, the relationship. So yeah, it's client and coach. But the coach needs to understand the client before taking them through the prep. If there is food behaviors, there's things that need to be worked on, and why the fucking hell they're doing it. Why are we doing this? Why are we going into extremely low body fat? Start reversing people out in their mind in the, yes, you know, what we'd say is as the guidelines, what we're speaking about. I talk about the reverse out before the prep if I get the opportunity. This is what it's going to look like, you know.
As you should.
Yeah. And
yeah, get people fired up, get people ready. Like they need to understand that, like, once this is over, we have a plan.
Yeah.
So the work is not done after the 16 weeks and after you stepped off stage. I think I think there's more crucial work to be done when you're done bodybuilding. Like, we got to clean up the mess now.
Yeah. And also, if you've funneled a lot of shit into the prep, you gave that example of that guy earlier. I know a lot of people that will do this. You know, essentially, they've been through something traumatic, or they're not in a good spot in life, so they do a prep. I've done it myself, for sure. And then off the back of the show, when your hormones are all, you know, tanked and everything's all over the gaff, you know, where do you then go if you haven't got someone you can talk to, or your coach is, you're at a level where you've got that vulnerability and you've been honest with them? You know, it's like, and then people will switch coach because, oh, you know, I don't know what to do. Or people will run out of money and they say, I can't afford my coach anymore. Again, if you're taking someone on for a prep, if any coaches are listening, ask them to sign up for a guaranteed at least 6 weeks after the show. Tell them this is how much it's going to cost. Because would you know that as a first timer? Would you know, okay, after the show, I need a coach? But that's where it's exciting. Like you said, that rebound of like, bloody hell, I feel quite good now. And that gets better. It keeps getting better. And you feel so much better as you reverse out and go into your growth phase. But the growth phase doesn't start until you've done that reverse out. And that can take a long time, particularly with stimulant use, a lot of cardio and things like this. But it's our job as coaches to get people excited for that. I'm sure you'll agree.
I mean, that's, to me, exciting my clients about the mundane work, the everyday boring stuff is what I like to do the most. Because once you start getting, because at the end of the day, whether it's physique enhancement for the gen population, whether it's for bodybuilding, if you can't get excited about the boring stuff that goes into this process, then you shouldn't even start to begin with, because it's going to be boring. Like life, like I always tell people, life is not lived in the peaks and the valleys. Right? Like life is not lived up here. Like it's not always going to be vacation, and it's not always going to be death, right? It's going to be somewhere in between, and somewhere in between is pretty boring. So you have to be able to accept boring. You have to be able to thrive and find pleasure in the everyday boring stuff that you have to do. Weighing your food, measuring your food, prepping your food, going to the gym, going to bed at 9, waking up early, repeating it over and over and over and over and over again. And then every once in a while, it's exciting. Every once in a while, it's a photo shoot. Every once in a while, it's a vacation, but it's not the common thing that happens. We live inside that boring part. And if you can get excited about the process versus the end result, that's where I think the longevity is going to be there.
You could easily, I guess, say, you know, if you don't enjoy the day-to-day of being a bodybuilder, then don't fucking do it. However, can you learn to do it? Is there certain things that maybe we could talk about from a coaching standpoint, where it's like, how can we get that transition? Because people fight it and they think they want a physique, but they don't even want to measure the food. They don't want to hit a fluid target, etc., etc. When we talk about that, like idealistic aspiration to be leaner or whatever it is, what you want to do, if you don't enjoy it,
yeah, I mean, it's no different than with my general population folks. You know, they come into my coaching and they have a goal.
Yeah.
And then I immediately tell them whether what they're talking about is realistic or not. And then I asked them, I said, what are you willing to do? Like, you have this vision, right? We know where point B is, right? We know where point B is. We know where point A is. There's a lot of work between A and B. Are you willing to do the work? This is what it's going to look like. So you lay it all out on the table. You give that individual the power of choice. You tell them what it's going to be. What's the worst day going to look like? What's the best day going to look like? What the in-between days are going to look like? You can't really predict how long it's going to take with your average person, but you can predict a little bit more with bodybuilders, because typically they're coming to you in a much better place and they might have a little bit more experience, usually, hopefully. But if they don't, like, you need to basically spoon feed them information like as if they were a child. And then you have to give them the opportunity to say yes or no. Like, are you willing to do this? Do you, like, now that you see all of this on paper, you know exactly what the plan is, you know what you're going to have to sacrifice, you know what it's going to look like, do you still want to do it? And there's no harm in saying no. I don't want to take your money and pressure you into doing this unless you actually consciously made the choice to be here. I just, to me, ethically, I just couldn't do that. That's why on every one of my exploration calls with people, I tell them, like, what you're asking for is not something I can deliver, and what you're asking for is unrealistic based on what you're willing to put into it. I just don't think we're going to be a good fit. You know, I can make you miserable for 10 months. I can make you miserable for 7 months, but do you want to be like that? Are you going to be complaining the entire time. I'm going to have to field all these questions about how shitty you feel, even though this is what you decided you wanted to do. And it has to be open and honest communication, vulnerability, transparency every step of the way. And if it's not like that, then you don't need to be with that person, or that coach is not the right fit for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly something you learn as you coach over the years as well, isn't it? I do get coaches listen to the podcast, and I'm sure, as you know, a lot of competitors transfer into being a coach because it lends itself well to being a bodybuilder. And there's going to be people listening going, you know, I'm struggling to get 5 clients, right? How do I even do that? And you guys are talking about, you know, things that feel like even doing an exploration call and saying, I'm not the right fit for you. That's something, at first I was like, it's not just, you know, the client that's looking for you. The coach has got to align and catch that vibe, I always call it, with the client. Now, if, you know, there is someone listening that is around this spot where it's like, I really want to be a coach. I don't know that much, but I need to learn. I'm going to get some education. I'm just taking on clients at the moment, and then they're coming up with clients that aren't doing what they need to do. What, with your journey of coaching, how did you sort of find your feet with that and have confidence in your approach and your coaching skills?
Education is number one. Source as much credible education as you possibly can. Like, try to know all the basics of training, try to know all the basics of nutrition, all the basics of energy systems. Like, learn those 3 topics as well as humanly possible, to where you have a very deep level of understanding and proficiency in that stuff.
Yeah.
And start talking about it every chance you get, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with potential clients. Like, start offering some coaching for free if you have to.
Yeah.
You know, train your parents, train your best friend, train your cousins, train your sister's boyfriend, whoever you have to train. Just get your repetitions in. It's like anything else, right? When you first go to the gym, you suck at it. Then you start building a skill set, then you get better at it. So once you start to build that confidence, you can start to build the conviction behind your words. And when you have confidence in your delivery of what you're saying, then you start getting people to believe you and to start to get attracted to that energy that you put out there. And then you start asking those individuals questions before they just blindly sign up and pay you money, and just make sure that your expectations are fully out on the table. Like, this is what I expect of you. Does that make sense? This is what you can expect from me. Is that fair? If you understand that the expectations are clear, then there's no confusion 5 months down the line if somebody's not getting results or somebody's not doing their part. It's not like, oh, well, you told me this or you told me that. It's like, yeah, I told you, but you haven't done anything. Yeah. You haven't delivered. I've delivered my end, but you haven't delivered on your end. So I can't coach you if you can't give me information. So I think education is number one. Having a system in place and having expectations in place are probably number 2 and 3. And then I would say the last piece of the puzzle to being a good coach is constantly keep developing your skill set. So just because you have the certification or you have the knowledge base of this thing doesn't mean that that can't change. It doesn't mean that you can't be open to more education. Always keep trying to learn from people that are better than you. Especially if you're a bodybuilding coach, you're going to have to know about hormones. You're going to have to know about PEDs. You're going to have to know about energy systems and cardiovascular work and digestion. You're going to have to know about mental health. So you need to be so well versed in all these different areas. Find the people in your industry that are the best at it and go directly to them and be like, if you can't teach me, where can I get this information? And just be a sponge for all of it.
Yeah, and refer out if you need to. You know, yes. If you're not a digestive specialist or GI specialist, or, you know, if you've got someone come to you with a thyroid condition and you're thinking, shit, you know, I had it when I was a PT right back at the start. I'd be like, I have got no idea here, but I really want to help this person. I don't know what to do. And I didn't have opportunities to sort of really, where I was from, to excel in the education vibe as I do now. And, you know, even now, if someone has got something that I'm not 100% sure I can help with, I've got professionals around me like Sonia, who you also are familiar with. She's excellent, you know, like you said, very, very smart. I can refer people to her if required. So don't be scared if you're a coach. If you get someone with a medical condition or a food disorder or anything like this, refer out, because you can actually learn as well. Like, you can maybe join in the calls and you can be there and talk about that. And it's super cool, but you know what it's like in this realm. There's so many conditions. You can't know it all, right?
No, and you have to stay in your lane. Like, know what you know what you're good at, know what you don't know. And don't over promise and under deliver. Always over deliver and under promise.
Yeah, love that. What a sentiment. Now, before we wrap up, we've got a new feature, another new feature. This is the episode to be on for sure. I mean, I chose you for this one. So I'm going to start answering a question at the end of every podcast, and you're going to be the first person to help me. And I feel like this is probably the most appropriate one. So this is from 𝗵𝗵, who's actually a client. Coaches that provide meal plans versus coaches that provide if it fits your macro. So we've sort of spoken about that today and what can come off the back of it. I'd say it's person dependent, but what are your thoughts around, you know, someone's like, well, what's the best, you know?
There is no best, first of all, when it comes to the human body and human emotions. There's never a best. It's going to be what's appropriate for the individual. So number one, I would ask, what do you prefer?
Yeah.
Know how to do both as a coach. If you're a coach and you're trying to coach clients, be able to give them both options and be able to know how to formulate both options. In my opinion, giving somebody a meal plan takes away choice, and taking away choice takes away education. But if you give somebody targets, whether they're calorie targets, macronutrient targets, I mean, you need to give them both, obviously. Yeah. And then maybe give them some type of a template that they can build out on their own. So be like, okay, cool. You have these two options for proteins. You have these two options for starches. Here's your list of vegetables. Here's your list of fruit. Here's your portion size recommendation. Plug and play however you want. That to me now gives that individual the ability to assemble things on their own and figure some stuff out to where they're not just robotically following a plan that they won't be able to follow outside of that situation.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't really have said it better myself, because there is going to be time for meal plans, right? You know, if you're in a prep or whatever, but it does for sure install the robot mode. And then, of course, like we've spoken about today, off the back of that, when you're allowed food, I say that in inverted commas, what then happens if you've got no education as to what you're actually eating? So it is physique development, which I feel like is probably our biggest message here today, is about exploring different things, but gaining education on how to retain or get the physique that you want, and trying to embrace all the different phases and finding a coach that you vibe with, that you can really respect, and they can educate you and be a sponge, like you said, like ask the questions, learn, and get excited for all the phases. So thank you so much for coming on today. And this is the first episode of the next part of the mental health series that I've launched. So I hope all the listeners have enjoyed the first part of the mental health series, and of course this episode today. And I'm sure you're up for people tagging you on Instagram stories if they enjoy this episode. And of course, if someone wanted to look at coaching with yourself, is this something that you're offering, or is it worth them inquiring?
Yeah, I mean, listen, reach out. I like fielding questions. So whether you like this episode, whether you liked what I said, whether you didn't agree with what I said, I accept all forms of communication. So if you want to hammer me on stuff I didn't do well, DM me on Instagram. It's 4 weeks to the beach. If you want to ask me questions about anything I said, please DM me. I will always answer my DMs. I'm the only person who does what I do. I have no assistant coaches. I have no virtual assistants. So you're always going to get me. Whether you supported me, whether you don't, either or, I accept and enjoy criticism of all kinds. Yeah. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you bringing me on. It's very cool to connect with people internationally. So it's very humbling to me and gratifying to me. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, for sure. I am super, super grateful that we have connected, because I love that you said you don't have a virtual assistant, because this, for me, I can't bring myself to do it. And I never really know when I reach out to someone, am I speaking to the actual person? So now you've said it, I'm like, when we speak, I'm actually speaking to you. So
yeah, this is me.
For that.
You're always going to get me.
Just makes life easier. I feel like I get too confused trying to train a VA to speak like me. I'm like, nah, I'll just keep doing it myself. If I have to stay up late one night, I'll stay up late.
Whatever. It's part of, we chose to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. And maybe we could do a second episode later in the year, but only if you want to, you know?
Happy to join anytime you want, Sarah.
Thank you. I'll speak to you soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye.
Take care. Hey!